Boy, Diane, I get to see you in person today.
Oh yeah, we never get to see her.
She can't hear us.
Looks like
Yeah,
she may still be connecting there.
Sorry, everybody, for being a minute late.
Mayor.
All right, we have everybody. Looks like we've got everybody. There goes my hair again. Welcome, everybody. This is October 5th, 2020, little after 6 o'clock, 6:07. This is City of Idaho Springs work session. We have a few items on our list tonight, so hang in there with us and we'll move through it. First, what we're going to talk about, we have Nina on with us. What we did at our last meeting is asked our legal counsel to prepare us a concept and an ordinance about inclusionary housing. I know over the past couple of weeks since we've talked about this and had our combined planning commission and city council work sessions, I know that there's been a couple of people that have had some questions about inclusionary housing, including myself. So with that, I just kind of want to open it up. Scott Pinnell sent out an email to us to talk about inclusionary housing, where there's some communities that it wasn't so good for. I had mentioned and Art mentioned at our meeting that, you know, with the size of projects that we're getting, then you pass that cost on to the non-restricted residents, how that will impact and drive those costs and those rents and those purchases up. You know, and then I made a comment also in that we're really going to have a lot of housing to really put a dent in what we're trying to accomplish with affordable and attainable housing in our community. You know, think about it. If that 400 unit project would have gone up on Pine Slope, that really only gives us 40 units. And to have a big housing project like that and only accommodating and then basically 400 units puts us to the max of City of Idaho Springs and what we've kind of looked at with our housing needs assessment of about the type of housing and how much housing we need in Clear Creek County as a whole. So I want to just kind of open it up. Scott, your thoughts with the email that you sent us. Voice your concerns and your thoughts as well.
Yeah, I think if you read that article, got a chance to read it today, it's just an opinion that sometimes this could hurt middle class housing coming into the area because a developer might not elect to do a project if it doesn't make sense. So I wouldn't want that to happen if we did something for inclusionary housing. That's just one of the thoughts behind it. I don't know if everybody got to read that or not.
Scott, that was a great article, and I know Art had expressed a similar concern because then you have to pass on the cost to the other people who may be renting apartments in the in the same building. So I really think that is a very valid concern that I know Art had originally raised, and I appreciate the article.
Well, I thought it was a great article. I think it points out that something I've been trying to say very politely throughout all the meetings is that a builder is going to build for profit, to be profitable. I don't believe that income, workable housing or whatever you want to call it is their main concern. So I think this article really points that out in a way. The only thing I took exception to the article about is they said the only way to really make it up is for putting in high density communities, which I'm opposed to. And so I wouldn't like to see us go that way. But I think it points out the issues that we talked about as far as increasing costs to other people, which I think is unfair. And the the agenda of a builder is to make a profit. We should not forget that.
Barb?
I just wanted to give a little bit of background with the 2800 minor project, which is where the mobile homes are. And when we first talked to them about the traffic impact fee, this was before inclusionary housing, the developer said, well, if you impose any impact fee on me, then I'm going to just keep those mobile homes as they are, and I'm not going to develop.
So this could be kind of the same thing,
Yes,
that you're kind of saying this has to be included. And they say, well, I can't make my numbers and my performer will work. So moving on.
and I think that maybe we should just backtrack a little bit, and based on the slideshow we put together with Jonathan's help, I think one of the things that is really important to remember, both to Scott and Art's point, is you're at 95% occupancy. So, my sense, having listened to you, is what's really important is to provide any kind of housing in the community. So that's point one. And then I think the second thing that council needs to consider, and Andy, thank you for sending it to me, the school property has now been advertised for sale. And so as you think through this, I think you need to consider that you've got a number of parcels that are going to come onto the market. The package that Cushfield Wakeman put together, I thought was very good. What was interesting was that you have to submit a bid for each parcel that is under consideration. So I'm just providing a little bit of context in terms of what's going on. In terms of 1800 Colorado Boulevard, that's going to be a couple more units. But again, they're already in the hopper, as is 2800 minor. So you could not impose this requirement on people that have already made application.
2800 has not formally made an application though, have they?
They've had their community meeting. So
Application.
we'll have to check because that guy moves around. But yeah, that's where we're at.
And just to fill everybody in on that, in our code, impact fees are $5,000 per unit. He's proposing 68 units over there. And then when he found out that he was going to have to spend close to $500,000 before he could even start, he basically backed out and said, $350,000 to $500,000 for impact fees before I get going. That kills my project. I really don't know. And maybe I need to understand impact fees a little bit more before I actually make a comment back on that. It just seems that a developer having to come up with that kind of money for an impact fee on a project. But that's for another discussion.
Mike, I'm sorry, I had a question about that because I think there's already like 28 units there. So wouldn't it essentially be half? Because I assume we're not charging an impact fee when there's already some units there on the property.
So I just sent a draft memo to Carmen and Andy regarding your traffic impact fee, and I suggest we just stay on the inclusionary housing for this point in time until Carmen and Andy have a can comment on that memo.
Okay. Any other council have any thoughts or comments? Right now we have a 5-unit. What's being proposed is 5 units would be the trigger, and then 15% of the project. So if we had 5 units, 15% of 5 times 15%. So one of those units would actually have to be one of 5 would have to be affordable housing. Can we frame this and put words like desire? We always have people ask, what are our incentives? What kind of incentives does the city offer for us to come into the community? A lot of us talked about tap fees. Tap fees on a large project can get very expensive. That's been something, we don't have anything that we can offer up as perks, if you will, to a developer to build. And us to insert inclusionary housing actually puts another leg down on it, I think. I'm really, after sleeping on it, thinking about, I'm just really afraid of developers steering away from that, knowing that, especially in this day and age, that they're gonna have to get the most out of these units as they can to recoup their investment.
Yeah. Like the other thing just that I want to point out, and again, this is a more detail rather than the bigger question, but one of the things that's required in section B1 and B1C is that it requires you to round up. So if I came in and wanted to develop 7 units, the set aside is 1.05 units, and that means I have to provide 2. That's a really, really heavy hit for me as a developer. The second point that I think would need to be addressed, the way this is written, and I had Bob Haywood, who has done a lot of work for probably like one of the biggest developers in Colorado, Marcel Arsenault, is that the way it's written, it appears that I as a developer could provide land and not the unit. And so if I'm a developer, I would much rather provide the land and not the unit.
So can I could comment on that since I wrote the ordinance.
Yep.
The first thing is, I mean, the percentage, if, we could always round up the normal way, if it's 1.5 rounds up, that's not a problem. And the land, it's very clear, dedicating the land to a nonprofit housing developer, and then the units to be built shall be comparable. I mean, we could always, again, if that's not crystal clear, make that language clear, but it's not just dedicating land, it's dedicating it to either the city or a qualified nonprofit housing developer as approved by the city to build that same amount of units or more.
My recommendation is if council wants to go forward with this, we should probably tighten that up, because again, my concern is that even if I give the land to a not-for-profit, the not-for-profit could sit on it for a really long time. And
No, so that wouldn't happen because it's approved by the city. I mean, just so everyone knows, I've worked on this for many years, and it's very successful in cities I've worked for. Obviously, it's up to the council for, it's your policy decision, but yeah, everything is negotiated with the city, and that's not the experience that I have. A nonprofit housing developer wants to create housing, but yeah, of course we could add, sentence or whatever words need to be to tighten that up. That's not a problem at all.
So Nina, if I, based on the way this is written in your experience, so what happens if a studio apartment is built and it can accommodate 2 people and presumably could be rented affordably at $1,570? But it could also be affordable to a single person at $1,374. At what price can the owner offer the apartment? Is that up to the owner?
If they're going off the HUD guidelines, it's either.
And is there a maximum? One of the things HUD doesn't deal with is a maximum occupancy level for a housing unit.
Well, I think that's debatable because they will control for that when they do audits of housing units, depending on the occupancy in the unit. That's why the occupancy is on that chart.
Just asking, I always play Columbo, so I ask the dumb questions.
Where does the workforce housing benefit if we trade for land? Where are those, how do those people benefit from that?
So you dedicate land to some, either the city who is creating the housing or a non-for-profit housing developer, which means Habitat for Humanity, a housing trust. Their goal is to create the housing. And like I said, we can make the language tighter that they need to build at least X amount of units. But this is very, very successful because you're putting it to, you're allowing someone who does this for their whole goal and their whole, their whole mission to create this housing. And it would have to be at the AMI that we designated.
So the land would have to have the ability, we'll say, like if it's 2 units that we're going to give back to that doesn't have to be part of the workforce housing. So then two units have to be available to be built on the land that he or she gives us.
Right, we can make that tighter as it seems like it's not as clear to everybody. So yeah, that would be the way it would benefit, because it would either, let's say they never want to include it in their development, but they still needed to reach this goal. They would then dedicate what they do is that they take away some of the, let's say the development, like a little corner, and they grant that to the city or the not-for-profit. That way the developer doesn't have to deal with it, but they're still giving that to build units or to somehow either build a house or apartments. And like I said, it's one successful way for them to address this issue.
It still seems like the work for housing people are being put on the back burner, but in any case. And Barb, you talk about occupancy being at 94, 95%. I think we have to be very careful that we don't get so much a volume of building in here that we have a glut of places that can't not be filled. And I don't know that we consider that when we hear 94 and 95% occupancy, what the other end of that spectrum can be if we're not careful.
And that's what we have always talked about, smart and responsible growth. And that's where my question is how many units, housing units have to be built before we can actually put a dent in the amount of workforce and attainable housing that we need. And I just don't think those numbers, if we need 150, we've got to have 1,500 units in town. And that's not going to happen. And I mentioned as well, and I've got John looking at it, I really believe that our best way forward for getting enough housing that we can put a dent in the market is by another tax credit or other subsidized type housing. So John Kane is an expert on it. That's what he went to school for. So I really got him looking into the other avenues that we could take in providing some of this housing.
If, to that point, if we did have a fund of money, it would make it dramatically easier to get a LIHTC project in here, because we could use that in conjunction with the developer to build something meaningful for our city. And that's one reason why an ordinance like this might be helpful, is because it would give us skin in the game so that we're not asking somebody to come in here and put everything up on their dime.
Yeah, that's what we've done in Salida. There's because you have the in lieu of fee, and so if people don't want if they don't want to provide the units, they would pay that fee, and it would go to a separate fund, and then that would be used towards the projects that you're talking about. Because otherwise, the alternative is doing nothing. Like at least if you just don't do anything with this ordinance, and it's just doing nothing versus at least something for your issue, but Jonathan brings up a good point, because I know at least builds funds for that purpose.
Mayor?
Yes, go ahead, Jim.
Mayor, how many units are up in Georgetown at the Bighorn Crossing total up there? Do we know the total count of those? And then how many of the residents are employed here in town?
I actually mentioned that earlier about the housing, that we'd probably get some workforce coming down. I want to say it's 160 units, Jim. I'm not sure, because
160,
there's actually a couple of different projects going on in Georgetown. So it's not all the Georgetown Lake project. There's actually another one. And where did I hear that? Was that you, John, that said that they built 10 units? Was that you? Somebody said it was something about them building 10 units up there. Yeah,
Lindsay.
I don't remember what that was. But they've got a couple of different projects going. And I can see that some of that workforce will come down to Idaho Springs. A lot of it
Right.
will go up to Loveland and maybe even Summit County, because it's almost in the middle. So I do believe that we will get some workforce. Of course, they'll be opening a new hotel up there, and they opened a new brewery a couple of months ago. So, and from what I understand, they're hurting on help at the brewery. The brand new brewery that just opened up. So,
and am I correct also so if there's an applicant for the Riverbend or Bighorn Crossing or anybody from even Summit County or even in the metro area, that anybody can apply for that type of housing, right? Like you
There
don't
are
have to
some
be a
people
resident.
who do.
no,
You can-
we not in any document. There are communities that do that. Breckenridge does that they have some housing projects that I think that 40 hours has to be spent within the county as work. So that means one person, a husband and wife, if one works for the county or works in the county, that would suffice them getting one of those units. And those units are restricted. If you quit your job in Summit County, go down to Denver to work, you're putting that deed up on the line because it's deed restricted. So there are projects like that, Jim, that you do have to work in the county or work in the city, mainly county and Summit.
Sure. It just seems to me it's a little unfair for the people that we kind of want to stay here for workforce, quote unquote, that, a family out of Denver or a single mom or a single father would come apply, keep their job in the city, in the Front Range, but save their money enough on the rent that they would pay under, affordable housing, and basically almost get a raise to move up here.
That's a good thought. I really haven't thought about that, but that could be a potential happening. So you're saying that we should probably keep, so saying that nobody from outside the county could live in these.
Yeah, absolutely.
The HUD project, I believe that was questions and things that was inclusionary in that document when we went to Chaffa and for that LIHTC project.
That's a great point, Jim.
Thank you.
So,
I just don't think it's fair that we're trying to accommodate the residents and what we want to accomplish by doing these big projects and stuff, and, allowing these developers to come in and do it. And it's a big joint effort and a lot of moving parts that all work together. And yet, just like I said, that, somebody from the outside could certainly apply to live there and then not even attain the goal that we're after kind of for our own community.
And I don't know how we could put a restriction on that, because in Breckenridge, they have a program that a percentage of their sales tax goes to workforce housing. So they actually have some skin in the game on these, and the city is collecting taxes and putting it towards these projects. And I think that gives them some kind of avenue to put these restrictions on. Nina, can you help us out with that? And does that make sense?
With the restrictions on living in the county and living in the city?
Yeah, if we're going to get another LIHTC project, can we restrict those for only employee or people that have employment within our county?
It's very hard to restrict it in totality because of fair housing laws, especially as it relates to either racial or disability. So for example, if you have a disability, you can't work, and you're restricting it only to workers in Idaho Springs, or if you're just restricting it to residents of Idaho Springs, but the racial makeup of Idaho Springs is different than the rest of the state. They've come back and said it can't be exclusively, but where we found success is if it's maybe either a point system with preference, or setting aside a handful of a handful of the units to what you're saying, people who live and work in the county or the city. But it's very hard to restrict it for all the units.
Okay, well, I want to circle back around to inclusionary housing and where council would like to move forward on this. Is this something that we want to accept as ordinance and put it on our next agenda for adoption for the first reading? Do we need to talk about it? Have we wasted some time and had needed to prepare something and Barb working on it, and we decided maybe this isn't for our community? I just need to kind of get a temperature of council and what the next steps you'd like to take. Bob?
I think that there's a lot of moving parts here with those impact fees you're talking about and how it affects a developer. Maybe this should be an agenda some evening where we just talk about this. I know we got a lot of other things to discuss tonight where we can't go too in depth on this. This
Bob,
evening.
you gonna say something?
Yeah, finally, I'm off mute now. It seems to me that with the size of our community and the size of our developments that are at least typical development here, that we're simply too small to be messing with the market. That's where I come from, and I'm fairly familiar about trying to get financing for projects, and it's next to impossible. And I think that we will have outcomes that we're not planning on. The other thing about, whether somebody is employed in or out of the county, just comment on that. The jobs change. Somebody may work in the county, but if they find a job outside of the county, do they have to move out? Somehow that, I understand what you're saying, but I think that would be a hard one just from that aspect. And number two, I have a question. Is the county housing authority any help at all on any of this?
John?
I think that they are building an organization that will be more effective in the near future than it is currently, just because of the funding available to them. I think they're working really hard on becoming something more like what we think of as a housing authority, where they can issue private activity bonds and so forth. But I think they may be just a little ways away from being all the way there.
Okay. That's all for me.
And I don't remember who asked about the Georgetown Lake. I'm not familiar enough with what they were set up to do, because there was a lot of condotels. Do you know what a condotel is?
Yes.
So, you did.
They're really
so
ugly
just
things
briefly-
to have in your community.
Do what?
They're really ugly things to have in your community.
Yeah, these are condos that basically you got a hotel within close proximity, and the hotel actually manages those, takes reservations, gives the keys to them, and it's tied in with a hotel. And we don't need anything like that as well.
I agree.
So Bob, to be clear,
Say again, Jim?
sorry, Bob, to be clear, I was just saying for the applications for the renters of, nobody knows the future, obviously.
Yeah.
You could, hell, I might not be at Allied tomorrow. Whatever. But just saying.
Yeah, gotcha. No, I understand.
Well,
Okay,
with-
no problem.
And with that, Jim, I think I keep on referring back to Breckenridge because I went and toured these homes. They were very nice projects. But I think that they either 1 or 2 years, every 1 or 2 years, they basically have to reapply or give all the information about where they're at now. I don't work in the county, and I'm not sure if they have something within those restrictions that they would have to give notice and move out of those if nobody worked. I'm not familiar enough with it.
You know,
And
I
this-
think as far as that goes, Mike, I'm sorry, Art.
No, that's quite right.
I think as far as that goes, from what I understand, that there's one, two, or I don't know, there's a handful of people that might own a certain complex in each part of those, bigger resort towns. But the deal is that those guys are kind of fronting the rent money or a portion of to their tenants just for the season. And they know it's an X amount of time that they're there. So they know that their entire building's only going to be occupied for the, seasonal time of snow. That's kind of the way I understand it. The rest of them, I think, are VRBOs and different things like that. So.
My question is this ordinance just in reference to rental units, or are we talking
No,
about?
for sale and rental.
Yeah, it's
For
also
both.
rentals.
And have we ever measured how many people actually live here and work down in Denver or the Lakewood or those other areas, and how many people?
John should probably have a close idea on that from the census.
Yeah, we know that in the housing needs assessment too. And if I could email that to Andy and he could provide that tomorrow, I'm not 100%, it's not at the top of my brain, but we do have those numbers.
If I recall, and I may be off base a little bit here, but Clay Brown, when we had a retreat up at Blackstone Rivers, that he handed out a document that had amazing information and about housing and jobs and so on that I didn't know even existed. And it might be a little out of date now, but that data is certainly available.
It's available at the State Demographer Office on the DOLA website. You can look up all of that data.
Okay.
I can send Andy a link for that too.
Because when we're looking at numbers, we do have a certain size workforce in this town, and it fluctuates according to the seasons. But there's a nucleus of people who are here, permanently. And I'm positive that out of that number, certain people already own homes here or rent here as well. So we have to take into consideration those people who are already satisfied with housing and not try to overbuild, which will give us what Jim and other people have been talking about, an influx of people coming up from the other areas and just living here for the benefit and working other places. I don't think that's our goal. Is it?
Correct.
That's correct.
Right.
Nope, we're trying to provide for our workforce, and now if it's husband and wife and one of them works in town, one of them doesn't.
Oh, yeah, that's different. No, I agree.
That's fine. So where do we want to go with this? Do we want to think about it and have another work session and discuss it some more? Do we just want to table this for the time being? I need some direction, council.
I think we should talk about it some more, Mayor.
I think we should take it in order of importance. If other things come up that are more important, we should take it in order.
And maybe that'll give us some time for John to come up with those numbers of what we feel people that are commuting from our community down the hill to go to work or over to Summit County to go to work. And, and that'll go back to, we have every Monday at 2:00, we have a recovery task force meeting. And this is mainly, but actually 5 people part of this group now. And it still comes back to like Bojo's. Right now, if you didn't know, and we can probably talk about that other, well, anyway, our level of where we were at with the COVID, unfortunately, Clear Creek County has dropped a level now, where we were making great strides to getting to this protect your neighbor, going to a 500 person gathering and things like that. We have actually gone from now, we have stepped back a little bit. Instead of having 50% up to 175 people in an establishment, we're back to 50% capacity or 50 people, unless they can measure out in their establishment and gain a few more seats. So us moving in the wrong direction now is not good.
Who put that in order? The county? Is that something the county reversed?
Yeah, well, the county, the PhD, the public health director is the one
Okay.
that communicates with the state. And when they see a little increase in numbers, we base our, it's really convoluted. We base our numbers up here in Idaho Springs on the availability of hospital and hospital beds down in Denver. So whatever's happened there, it affects us, unfortunately, kind of like AMI. John and I and Andy had a pretty hefty discussion this morning about AMI and what's that mean for our our river residence project. And we're finding out that what we thought, and tell me if you had any other idea, that if somebody made $20,000, the rent was going to be about $400 to $600 a month. That's not what we're finding now. John, do you want to explain that real quick?
Yeah, Nina had talked to you guys a little bit about this as well. Our metro statistical area is Denver. So we are in the Denver metropolitan area as far as any statistics are concerned. The problem with that is I was telling Chuck earlier, the median household sale price in Denver right now is $606. Rentals are going $1,500 to $3,000 a month, depending on what you're getting. And that's not a lot at the moment. So what happens is that inflates what our rent looks like here in the city. And it's one of the problems. It's also one of the reasons why we can't look at housing in Idaho Springs as a city issue. It's really a regional issue because there's so much pressure in Denver. The relief economically is coming to Idaho Springs, which is one of the last, reasonably affordable areas in the metropolitan area. So what that means for Riverbend residents is that they look at AMI being like 70,000 based on HUD data. Our AMI is 47,000. And when I say 70, I think it's like high 60s is what it is in Denver right now. So what they set their rents to are the MSA levels. That's what HUD does because they're a federal organization. And so they don't really know that Idaho Springs has, we have a lower AMI than the Denver metropolitan area. So they just set all their rents off that level. So what ends up happening at Riverbend is that where a person may be like 60% AMI here is like in the 30s, but they see it as like 48,000, which for us is like median income. That's 50% AMI. So everything is a little bit, it makes it harder to qualify for some of these things for some of our people who are really actually struggling, just because the difference in income between here and then the metropolitan Denver as a whole, meaning all the neighborhoods or the cities around Denver that are in that Front Range area.
So the rents are coming in higher at that project?
Well, because they're federally set, they're based on number of bedrooms and number of occupants. And there's even weird rules with HUD where you have to count your children's income in certain situations. So there are really funky stuff that happens in those affordable housing projects just to make sure that they are available to people making lower income. And so they do require a relatively, and then there's this other law that happened in Colorado, well, in kind of all over the country called income averaging. So they can take higher AMIs if they take lower. So it gets really funky. I think what we're seeing at Riverbend right now is the units they have available are really the nicest and the biggest units. And so the qualification for those units that are available is higher. I think when the building opens and we have 1-bedroom units as well, I think we're going to see some of those lower rents come into play a little bit more. I think in theory, we should have rents at $450 a month at Riverbend. And that may change next year because they changed that based on like cost of living essentially and the indexes they use for that. So we may see that change in 2021, but for 2020, it was set pre-COVID at, booming economy levels.
So they include that poor kid's allowance for $5 a week in the income, huh?
They can, yeah. That's why it's you have to be real careful.
All right. Thanks, Jonathan.
Yeah, those rickshaw, those petty bikes, they better not report their income to their parents because I heard they're cleaning up.
Yeah.
Okay, direction. Bring this back to another work session. Let everybody think about it and come up with some more ideas, and we'll make a decision whether we want to move this forward as an ordinance in our municipal code. Is that good?
Yeah, I guess, Mike, I'm thinking let's do meet once more, but let's intend to make a decision at that point.
Okay. Agreed. Let's put that on a work session next week and then we can move it to action item. Andy?
So the second reading would need to be postponed. Is that correct?
Yeah, well, if we have a work session next week, our second reading it for 3 more weeks, right? Didn't we just do the first reading last week?
Diane, can you weigh in on that? Okay, we'll check into that, Mayor, just to
Okay.
see if we may need to push that out. We'll see.
Okay, we can do that. We can table it. All right.
When will the work session be on it? Just so I can come to help? Or will you tell me the date?
I'd like to see it be back on. Do we want to try to do it as fast as next week, or do we want a few weeks to think about it?
How heavy is our regular meeting gonna be next week? I think we should look at that, because we want to give it ample time. And I don't know what's on the agenda for the, our regular council meeting, but I think we should see if that's workable.
We will have limited time at the work session next week because it's before a regular meeting. We already have
Right.
2 items on there. We could probably have about 15 minutes, I would think, but we might need more than that.
I don't think we're gonna need more than that.
Okay.
Let's do it on the work session in 2 weeks.
Okay.
Man, I'm trying to give everybody a night off. All right. Okay, is that good with you, Nina?
The 12th?
Oh, the
Oh, you'll
We
just let me know.
decided to wait till the
19th.
18th, right, Andy? On just a work session night with no meeting. I'm looking for my phone here too.
19th.
Yeah,
Yeah, 19th.
it wouldn't be any earlier than 19th. We do have the budget. I don't know how far we'll get on that tonight, but I think on the 19th, we ought to dedicate mostly to budget. So we'll have to see.
You'll let me know.
I will.
Okay. All right, let's move on to CARES Act funding. John? Is this to discuss the current funding or the additional money that I'm not sure exactly what this topic was going to be, Andy.
So Mayor, this was just to provide an update to council regarding Minor Street, some of the changes that are happening, and then also the additional CARES funding that will be available, the city could apply for if it chooses.
Okay.
So just kind of an update on things related to coronavirus and particularly the CARES funding.
Okay, so with that, there's actively a grant application out. The deadline for that grant has passed. There's still negotiations with the Clear Creek County and the Economic Development Corporation on how we're gonna rate these applications and fund the businesses that have applied. Something that we have run into is one, we've got over 50 applicants that qualify for the loans, and or the grants. It's a grant, it's free money, and equates to over $1 million worth of grants. And we only have 512,000, John.
577, I think.
I think they changed it about 3 times. We don't know. We're still working out the details with a MOU with the Economic Development Corporation and the county. Once that happens, the loan committee at the EDC will start scoring these applications, and they're making recommendations back to the county of who, how, and how much each applicant should receive. Another thing that's happened is we received $50,000 to pay for things that happened during the corona epidemic, and things like our picnic benches that we bought, barricades that we bought, and numerous of other things. The city, we decided that instead of letting the county pay back or to report and get reimbursed, that we took the $50,000. We're the only municipality that did that. And then we were going to pay our own reimbursements. We're going to file for our own reimbursements. That equated to about $38,000. So there's $12,000 left. There's two other municipalities that receive money less than us. Georgetown, I think, got 25,000, and Silver Plume, I want to say it was either 10 or 15,000. And something that I talked about, seeing how short we fell on the business support program. Georgetown and Silver Plume have decided to give that money, that 25,000, I think it's $35,000, back to this other business support program to be dispersed. So that would be another $35,000 that could help businesses out. We've got $12,000. We don't have as much as them. I believe that there could be some other things that we could spend that money on, PPE, other things related to the COVID. And what I'm here to ask council is, do you think it would be a good showing of the support for our business community to just go ahead and take that other 12,000 and throw it back, so another business could either get a little bit more in their ask, or another business could actually get funded? Any thoughts or comments on that?
I think anything we can do to help our businesses in town would be the right way to go. I mean, we're coming into winter. I think a lot of these businesses are really going to be strained.
And we know that most of the businesses ask, you could apply for a grant from 5 to 20,000. And we know that we did have some that just applied for $7,000. That's all they needed. But the majority, of course, applied for the $20,000.
Right.
And it goes back to the guidelines that we were going on was everybody understood and thought that on the application, oh, what are you going to use this money for? And I'm sure that most, and me included, put the uncertainties. We don't know what's going to happen over the next 5 months. You know, everything could go great. We could be busier than we've ever been, but that's not what we're really expecting. And with the amount of business with the ski areas going to reservations only, we're going to see a lot less traffic this winter going up to the mountains to go skiing. And we can't predict the future and what it's going to do for our businesses in our community.
Right.
You know, so, and that's kind of where I was going, Art, is if we could get back a little bit of this money. I know Andy said he could spend it on other things, but you know, I think that shows the city council and leadership of this community understands the importance of helping our businesses survive. And even though we're not giving 25,000 back like Georgetown did, we actually did expend money and had to get, had to file for the reimbursement on it. So
we're giving back what we have. I mean, that's, I think that's a good showing.
I think it's a good faith thing, and certainly the businesses, some are in much worse shape than the city. We have no real compelling need right at this point where we need that 12,000. I'm sure there are some businesses in our community that do. So I agree with you, Art.
Other council members?
I agreed with Art.
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Jim?
Absolutely. Yeah.
John? Curtis?
Yes,
Okay.
I agree
So
with that.
what we'll do is we will, of course, we're going to have to figure out how to do it because, like I said, we opted to take the money and do our own filing for our reimbursements. So we'll have to see the legality and what we need to do. But I think that's going to be a big showing for how we respect our businesses and respect the health of our businesses, willing to do anything to try to help them out. Even though $12,000 is going to just be a little shot in the eye, it's not going to be big. It's just that, somebody else can use it. And like you said, Bob said that we haven't been, the city yet has not been into dire straits that $12,000 or we already spent it and needed to file for that reimbursement, get that money back. All right, very good. Anything else on the CARES Act funding, John or Andy?
Andy, do you want to discuss the reserve fund or?
Are you speaking of the additional application for CARES funding, John?
Yeah.
Okay. So as was mentioned a little earlier, there's an opportunity for the city to apply directly for CARES funding from the feds that the state held in reserve. And there's a very tight turnaround to apply for this money. So one of the things we've been talking about with our recovery task force today, and we'll talk with them again next Monday, is what, if anything, do we want to apply for? It obviously has to be coronavirus related. And it also, the emphasis is on sustaining businesses through the winter. That the governor's made that very clear. That's the focus for these funds. So we're trying to determine what we should apply for. And I think we just want to see whatever thoughts council may have, and we can revisit this again next Monday. But we have to get the application in by the 15th, October 15th, which is, end of next week. So one of the thoughts that John Kane came up with, which I thought was a great idea, is to ask for another infusion into our business improvement grant program. And as you know, we've had 2 rounds of grants that have been provided by Henderson for primarily focused on business facades to help businesses improve their facades, first along East Colorado Boulevard after it was rebuilt. And then it was opened up the second round to any business, including downtown. So our thought was that maybe, since we already have the structure of that program in place, that maybe we make the focus on improvements to a business, internal or external, that are needed to deal with COVID-19, whether that be barriers, whether it be modifying the premises, so those sorts of things. So this was an idea we just came up with today. We actually haven't talked with the recovery task force about it because we were just brainstorming this afternoon about it after the meeting. So I just, if there are any thoughts from council on that, or any other suggestions you might have, we're going to have to decide pretty quickly what to apply for.
Well, that's a great idea.
What
Yeah,
exactly is the turnaround time? Sorry, Chuck.
To get the CARES funding?
Yeah, what was the turnaround time where we have to spend this?
I believe it's end of January, John, I think. I think that was in the application. I think they give us a little more time than it was the end of the year for the initial round of CARES funding, the end of this year. And I believe it might be the end of January. John, do you have that application handy there?
Give me 1 second. I was looking at it today too.
It's a pretty tight turnaround. I can tell you that, Bob. That's what I remember.
Sorry, Chuck, you were.
Oh, no, we're good. I had the same question in my mind, and I'm glad Andy's able to verify that, because I was thinking it was the end of the year.
What I think is any free money that we can get to help our businesses, to help the city, or to help the residents of our community out, we should be applying for.
Absolutely.
We should find something to spend that money on and apply for everything. John?
Yep.
Agreed. Yep.
To be spent by January 31st.
So
Good.
So I think everybody's in agreement that we should go ahead and apply for it and get as much money and whatever resources we've got to try to help our community along. We need to be doing it. All right. Very good. All right, John, we'll move to holiday decorations. What do you have for us?
Mayor and council, at our last discussion of Christmas light or holiday lights, we had talked about trying to come up with a couple different alternatives for how we may decorate downtown. I've had a couple conversations with folks. The first is I talked to Colorado Christmas Lights. We had kind of talked about maybe see what he'd do for $10,000. He basically told me he'd give us essentially the same show we had last year, minus the visitor center and CRC Park, for $10,000 in return for a contract. The information in your staff report is slightly incorrect. He sent me an updated version of this. The first year would be $10,000. This would be year one of the contract. The second or the next 4 years would be, we would commit to spending at least $17,000 per year. So that's significantly less than we have. We usually spend like 20, we've been spending 24 to 28. I also talked to Kimball Christmas Lights. They're in Evergreen. They purchase, or they'll sell us wholesale lights, and they do some more like programmable things. So you can program the lights to music and things like that. They gave me a whole host of options, which I included in your staff report, just so you could see kind of what they can do. I think one of the benefits of that is we could build a big display over time, but they won't install it unless we pay them pretty significant amount of money. The Colorado Christmas lights folks take care of everything. So we don't have to do anything. Our public works doesn't have to do anything. Just kind of comes in. We don't own those lights, but it's pretty much a plug and play kind of deal. The last one, I have been talking to the Christmas committee for about this like homegrown holiday idea that we have. We don't have a ton of Christmas decorations or lights, but I do believe that if we try really hard, if we're at a zero budget here, we can try to encourage the businesses to decorate their windows. We also may be able to use Mountain Youth Network as volunteer force to kind of help with that process. So there's other things that we can do too, low cost. We may be able to purchase some garland for very inexpensive to decorate things around town. I just wanted to throw that in there as like a third option. If we are at a zero budget here, we may be able to still do something. It's going to be significantly less than we could in the other options, but something. And then finally, in this staff report, I just wanted to tell you that we're working on this tree lighting event for the Saturday after Thanksgiving. What we do is kind of dependent on what the Christmas lights situation is. So I don't have an update for you exactly what the plan is for that yet, but I will soon as I can tell the Christmas committee what our plan is for city lights. My recommendation to you guys is simply that I think I'd like direction from what you guys would like to do. Personally, I think if we do have a budget to work with, the Colorado Christmas lights option puts the least amount of onus on our public works department. We know it's going to be a professionally managed display. It's going to be beautiful and bright. It'll be really inviting for our downtown, create good economic development for our businesses. I think that provides a really great option. If your preference is to go, as cheap as possible, I think I will go back to the Christmas committee and we'll try this window display option and see what we can do.
So John, this 17,627, is that in the future, after year one, the bullet points above it is all we're going to get for that price?
No, we have the option to change the show within the scope of that budget. What we're committing to is spending at least that amount. He was trying to give us, I told him, because one of his concerns is that what if the next year and the next year, like what if we're in a worst case COVID scenario and we enter into this contract with him and then try to cut him out? And so I talked to him about that and we said, hey, we've been spending at least 24,000 with you. This 17,000 number, I don't know for sure that that's a safe number, but he thought that was a safer number for him where he could do this cheaper show. And then if we'd increase to that, it works out for him. And then we could increase the lights accordingly. That's enough essentially to do the visitor center and to cover the lights we had at the roundabout last year, which are pretty cool. We don't have that solar system at the roundabout anymore, but we may have, there may be another place in town we could do a really cool little display or something like that. So all we're committing to is spending at least 17,000. And this would be, again, year one of the contract if we decide to do this.
What we normally spent, 28,000? What did we spend
That's
last year?
what we were budgeted for this year. I think we spent 24 last year.
Well, I believe that the lights draw people into the community. I believe that gets people off the highways into our downtown and our community to spend money. Now, is it another $12,000 of revenues to pay for it? I'm not sure, especially going into a year of uncertainty with Thanksgiving and Christmas. Another thing John just mentioned is the tree lighting after Thanksgiving. Right now, our step back with our meter, we call it the COVID meter. We can only gather 10 people. I'm not even sure that we could actually do this event. I think we need to be discussing that, Andy. Because we were at 25 people gathering, but now we're back to 10. This might be questionable whether we could even hold this event. So
one thing with the Christmas lights too is that if we were in a reduced capacity, Christmas lights is something that you could enjoy socially distanced without gathering. If we had Minor Street and you could take that walk essentially. And that might be I'm just throwing that out there as potential consideration.
Thoughts, council?
Yeah, I think the Christmas lights are a draw to the area, definitely.
Yeah, psychologically 2020, well, it is what it is. And it seems to me adding to it by not having the displays out there, at least like we've had in the past, would not be helpful at all. And I agree, we would draw fewer people without the lights. Absolutely. So I think we should go ahead with that recommendation.
Hey, John, I have a question for you, John. So the years following for the increase of price of 17,627, they're doing what they're doing this year plus those bullet points?
We are flexible. So he has those in there just as a scope of work for this year. We could build this, we could say we're spending 17,000. Usually that's what I do. I'll tell him this is our budget. What can we get for that? And he gives me a list of different areas, like potentially visitor center or whatever the case may be. We're not tied to any particular display. Typically we do the bridge coming into the historic district. We do City Hall, Citizens Park, and then we've done visitor center the last couple of years, and we put lights in CRC Park and on the roundabout is what we did last year. So
my only concern is going into a longer term contract. If we give him an amount, but we don't get the scope of work, that leaves a contractor open ended. They can change their price. They can give us, I understand their price will probably go up every year, but it'd be nice if we could get a minimum scope of work so that he's locked into that. Otherwise, that kind of gives him free rein to change his price on how much he does for us every year.
We could make that change. I think
I'm all for the Christmas lighting. I think it's something we really need. Keep the spirit up.
Scott, I had the same concerns. However, I would encourage the city not to enter into a longer term, a 5-year contract, only because there's so much uncertainty going forward. This may not be the best time to lock in a 5-year contract. I am for the Christmas lights.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm for the Christmas lights too. I think people need it.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think it's a must. Can we do a 2-year or no?
I honestly do not think he would do that. I tried pretty hard and he was not into the idea. The Kimball's Christmas light thing would potentially be an option as well. But the problem is I think we really want Director Bordoni to weigh in on that because of the workload required to install all those lights. We don't even have like a lift that's capable of doing those trees because of the height of them. So that was one of the reasons I was kind of leaning towards Colorado Christmas lights. I could definitely try and see if we could change the scope of that contract for sure at a minimum scope of service, but maybe he'd at least consider a length thing. But that was one of the ways I think that he was feeling more comfortable about, because I mean, we went from spending $24,000 to 10, and that was where I think he was thinking the pro to him is the long-term security. But I understand your point for sure.
So John, we're gonna task you with going back and negotiating with them, see what else we can get, tell them our concerns about signing a 5-year agreement with them. Yeah, we want you to get more.
John, I know you can win 2 years. Come on, man. You can do it.
All right. Challenge.
Okay, so that's what we'll have John do. Reach back out. Andy?
John, what do you think is the drop dead date for us to make a decision on this? That we're getting
real close. This is pretty much there. We may have a week or so to play here, but we really need to make this decision soon.
Okay.
Good.
I guess one of the questions I'd have for council is it an issue of both the term and the scope, or if it's just the scope and you can live with the term, John may be able to bring this back as early as our next council meeting on Monday. Or do you want to see it brought back in another form?
Or does council feel that we would like to get the same lighting that we got last year and see if John can negotiate a price down from the 24,000?
I think that's a good position to start with. I like it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, because we had so many compliments from so many people of what the lights were last year. It was, it was great. So
it was
we'll
awesome.
pass on with that. John, reach out to him, tell them what we did last time. What kind of number will you work with us on that?
Okay,
And then see if they'll shorten that term of the agreement from either from 5 to 2 to 3 years instead of 5 years.
Are
Tell
you
them we're just a
comfortable-
little nervous and skittish to making that kind of commitment right now with all the things that are going on with our society.
are you guys open? So you want me to try no contract and maybe a shorter contract as two options with him, or?
Now say it again.
So option A could be like no contracts, but maybe slightly more than 10,000. And option 2 would be maybe a shorter term contract, but keep it as cheap as possible.
I think that's what I heard, John. I think
Okay.
council's thought is that see if you can get negotiate down the 24,000 from last year into a 1-year deal this year that's a similar display. And option 2 might be a shorter term, similar show. Is that right?
Would council like to see lights at the visitor center then as well, to just make sure those are in there?
Yeah.
Yes.
It would, yeah.
Yes.
Great.
And if we did a longer, like a shorter term contract, I'd like to see a scope in there somehow.
We can get that done.
Okay. Anybody else? So you want to touch on fireworks, John?
All right, so at our last meeting, when we discussed fireworks, you guys asked me if I could get them to delay the show till next year and then start the contract after that. I was able to accomplish that. So that is done. That's at no additional cost. See, I'm getting good at this whole thing anyway. I'll get this challenge going. I just have this as an update that he's willing to do that. They are terrific people and they are working really hard for Idaho Springs. And so I just made a recommendation that you approve the contract for the fireworks for a 5-year contract for 4th of July fireworks for years 2021 through 2025.
Done and done.
Fantastic.
Way to go,
good
John.
with that. I'm good with that. Good job, John.
This-
So we're not going to have fireworks on Christmas tree lighting.
No, sir. And we may have challenge with that anyway. We're still under stage 2 fire ban and statewide fire ban. So ultimately, this may be something we needed to do anyway. So
No, I think it's got a fell in our court. All right, good work, John. Okay, we're done. Is everybody ready to go home? I don't see Phyllis piping in on here. Say, whoa, wait a minute. We're going to talk now about the SISA facility budget request. Phyllis, you're on mute. You're on mute, Phyllis.
Okay,
Hey, hello.
There you are.
Andy, were you able to provide council with the written request that I submitted? He's on mute.
I don't know if I got that. So if you can resend it to me, we can share it here, Phyllis, if you like.
Well, I'll just go over it quickly and then I will send it to Andy, because actually there are some changes since I first sent this in on September 20th. Every year we have budgeted in the general fund $2,000 just for whatever minor maintenance any of the properties might need. And we would ask for that to be continued. Although the committee didn't request it, the main level windows in City Hall were budgeted for this year. And of course, when you said about making your necessary cuts, that was one that went by the wayside, and it's in the preservation plan to be done next year anyway. So we are asking that that be included. Now, the amount that you budgeted this year was $100,000. There is some thought that that might be a little high. So Jonathan, it has had a tough time, as I understand it, getting in touch with Tim McDonough of Silver Plume Home Services.
we have a
And
meeting tomorrow morning at 8:30.
so I don't have a number for that, but whatever they come up with, whatever Tim estimates this would actually cost, then, and if it's 100,000, so be it. But whatever they come up with is what we would like to see in the budget. Something that isn't in the preservation plan because we were not aware of the condition is Central Hose House. It needs some exterior repairs. They are becoming quite urgent. This was mentioned, I think Bob brought it up when we had this discussion last year, but it has gotten worse. So we are asking that that be included. Again, we don't have a price. That is the second thing Jonathan is going to talk to Tim McDonough about. So again, whatever number they come up with. And for those of you that don't know, Tim McDonough is also the guy that did the original restoration on that building. So he's going to know quite a bit about what it takes and what it will need. Then, of course, the train situation has changed. So we are asking that the money for the complete assessment be put in the budget. I understand that the city may not have to spend it. Jonathan has a great plan. He's full of great plans. He has a great plan to maybe use some CARES money that the Loop could apply for, since it would be keeping their staff employed longer into the year. But we don't know what the number is. And we need to find that out, and that needs to be in next year's budget. The water wheels seems to need something every year. But we have elected not to climb down the hill or swim across the creek to take a close look at it. So we will defer to Mr. Bordoni to, perhaps they've already had a look at it, I don't know, but whatever it needs. Sometimes it just needs oil, just for wood preservation. Sometimes it needs a lot more. But again, whatever that needs every year needs to be in this budget for next year. Then I had there, it's going to cost $6,000 to get plans drawn up for the restoration of Hose House number 2, which is the one down on 6th Avenue. And that's a number I'm confident in. I spoke with Hain Architects and explained that I needed a number for the budget, and this is what they told me. So originally I had that in as a request for next year, but it now has occurred to me that it can be done yet this year. There is money budgeted for that hose house. It was not particularly for the architectural plans, and it was, I think, $15,000 in this year's budget. So if you can see your way clear to do that this year, it would certainly get things moving on a project that's been sitting still far too long. If you're not comfortable doing it this year, then we would ask that $6,000 be put in next year's budget. So I don't know what our total number is, but I know it's way less than we had in for this year. Of course, this year we had $250,000 as a grant match for train restoration, and that's a big part of it. But we did take into account the city's budget limitations under the current circumstances. We looked at what's in the preservation plan, what was budgeted for this year, what's been done, what hasn't been done, and this is what we've come up with. So we're well under $200,000 for this year to take care of these historic properties for which the city is responsible.
Phyllis?
Yes.
Maybe this isn't the time. The one on Soda Creek. What? I'm sorry. Refresh me. What is it?
The Powder House?
Yes. What?
Yes.
I know the building, but what was it? What was it used for?
Powder houses stored powder, and they were built in the general vicinity of, but not really close to, local mines. It was a place they could keep. That's why they're such thick stone. And you didn't want something like that sitting right next to where you were blasting. You wanted to have to get the stuff and bring it back.
Gotcha. So okay.
I would just, this isn't a budget matter, but it is a sites and facilities matter. Since all this with the train has changed so dramatically, our committee is going to be getting together in the next couple of weeks to make some revisions. Normally, we wouldn't be looking at it again so soon after you adopted it. But I think the addition of a shelter for the train and for looking at the time frame on a lot of this stuff justifies it. So you'll be getting that, I don't know, in the next month, maybe? Certainly before the end of the year. And that's it.
Okay, and you said, Phyllis, that you sent over a document to Andy.
I had sent it and he referred to it when we spoke earlier, but I will.
Okay, as long as we've got a written request. then-
Yes, I
Okay.
will amend it to match what I've said tonight, and then he'll have a document to move forward with.
Questions from council, Phyllis?
I would just say that I think Phyllis has been more than reasonable. And I would encourage city council to move forward with the $6,000 to Haynes Architect in this year, 2020, if possible.
No, absolutely.
Okay. All right, we will work on that. Thank you, Phyllis.
So then when I
Thank you, Phyllis.
when I send this revised document to Andy, I should not have that in there? Am I sort of hearing a bit of a consensus that you'll do the work? Or at least
I
start?
would just put your ask in there.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Phyllis, as always. Last but not least, is everybody ready to hang on for the ride? Either this is going to be a short discussion or I didn't get the full budget. Because I only got one page. Is that what everybody got? One page?
No, I got about 14 pages, 15 pages.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I got the same, Mayor, and I just caught the COVID.
I got one page.
Perfect.
I've got my other budget out in the vehicle. Well, let's go ahead and what are we gonna do? Run through? Are we running through the whole thing line item by line item? What's our intentions for the budget tonight?
Well, Mayor, you have a first draft of the budget. And we have Lorraine with us this evening, and this is a product of the meetings that we had with the department heads and Lorraine to talk about where we are and then what we might need for the new year. So I think the initial, of course, we're already an hour and a half into this meeting. I know it's getting long or longer than that because of the executive session. One suggestion, I was thinking that each department might have a chance to speak to their budget, but I think that would be a little bit too much this evening. Perhaps we could take advantage of having Lorraine with us and talk a little bit on the revenue side of the budget, and then go as far as you want to with the department requests. We don't have Chief with us. He's out of town, but we do have John, who can speak to either Public Works and or water wastewater. So Mayor, I'll really defer to you and council how you'd like to proceed.
Well, let's just start, but could everybody give me just a minute? Let me run out to the truck and get my budget. So at least I have some kind of numbers to go by. So if anybody needs to take a 3-minute break, do it real quick and I'll be right back.
And one thing we can do is put it up on the screen as well, if that would be something council would like.
I need something to write on. Let me run and get it. So everybody take a little restroom break for 3 minutes.
Andy, I didn't get any of the budget. I didn't even get one page.
It is available on the website, John. And I can send you a copy as well.
Yeah, if you'd send me a copy.
Okay.
I clicked on the link that came with the Zoom instructions. Are we all muted?
Yeah, you had a question, Lorraine? You came through loud and clear.
Oh, I was just saying that I clicked on the link that came with the Zoom instructions and the budget is in there, all the pages that I have, about 14 of them.
Good point, Lorraine.
They were in my packet, actually.
Yeah, there was a link to the packet online as well, I guess.
I'm not sure why some people didn't get their pages, but they could have contacted me before tonight.
I got 15 pages in my packet, yes.
Yeah, that's what I got.
Yep.
Lorraine, you've been real patient hanging with us this whole time. We should have put you up front, I guess.
No, this is fine. I'm happy to hear about some of the other issues going on. We didn't even look at the fireworks, did we? Or is that part of the lighting?
It was very short on that one. I knew we were getting a little bit long.
I'm gonna bow out, folks. You enjoy your budget discussion. I've been through enough of them.
See you, Phyllis.
Everybody stay well.
Take care, fellas.
Good night, fellas.
Good night.
Andy, I do have a question for you on these budget pages. The 2020 year-to-date column, was that from July or June? Do you remember?
Sorry, no, I was on mute. It's through August.
Through August, okay.
Yep.
Okay. My budget's easier to see because it's bigger print. All right, take it away, Lorraine. Oh, we're still waiting on Jim to get back. Jim, are you there? Let's wait another minute on Jim.
I'm good.
All right. Take us away, Lorraine.
I'll just start with the first page that was in the budget packet that came with the instructions to the Zoom meeting. Starts with the general fund revenues. I assume that's your first page as well.
Yep.
And looking at the total that's near the bottom of the page for the general fund revenues, I want to just focus on the various columns there. Obviously, you had 2.74308 in 2019 actual in these revenues, and your budget for 2020 was lower than that, 2.560. Through August, which is 2/3 of the way through the year, you've received $1,762,000. If those revenues came in evenly through the rest of the year, you'd be at 2.6 million by the end of the year. But we know that that first revenue, property taxes, doesn't come in evenly. It's all been received pretty much for everyone that paid on time through August. You've got your sales tax, which you are forecasting will be roughly similar to what you budgeted. And just scanning down and comparing the budget to, oh, that's 2021 request. I'm sorry, I missed that title. You've got your request total being very close to what your budget is for this year. Where you depart from that is the items of significance. So looking down to fines, those are expected to be lower in 2021 than had been forecast for 2020. And your sales tax are slightly lower, and I don't see any other major departures from what you had budgeted for this year and what you're budgeting for next year on your revenues, except for the three with the notes off to the side that are expected to decline due to fewer vehicles traveling and less oil and gas revenue. So your revenues are at 2.45 million. One of the next issues is after you look at those 2.45 million, we go to the expenses by department. So the streets department, again, the third column with numbers is the budget for this year. The last column of numbers is the proposal for next year. So you're seeing that next year's budget is proposed to be 476,000 for streets as opposed to 509.
John, did you want to add anything on your streets budget at this point? Highlight anything in particular?
No, there's really nothing in particular on streets. I've tried to cut everything as much as possible and still maintain the level of service.
So he's went out a little more than $30,000 worth between the years. Then we go to the administration budget.
One thing we might highlight, we did discuss, and what we'll do is, you're familiar with the account number, line item account number is on the far left column. And one line item we did talk about as staff, John, help me, it's contract employment or contract, where is it?
Are you talking water and wastewater, or are you talking streets?
I'm sorry, I'm thinking of parks, disregard. Sorry. Okay, anything else on streets, John?
No, I don't think so, unless council has any questions.
So I think overall, I think our thought was with the budget is we just don't know for next year. And that is the difficulty. Usually we can look at trends. We've had very favorable trends in the last 5 years. And this year, we were expecting actually worse. I think I was in March, I think we were. And our sales tax has been up and down. Kind of a little hard to figure out. And then in July, the most recent report, we had a big drop, but we also had a very big tax year, sales tax year last July of 19. So we should be receiving the August sales tax report any day. And so next time we talk budget, and there'll be multiple meetings where we talk budget before we finalize it, we'll have a better idea of what August looks like. So we're trying to hold the line on all expenses. We're trying to cut wherever we can cut and be pretty conservative on revenues. Actually, Lorraine has encouraged us not to be too conservative, which I appreciate, particularly she being the finance person, that we need to balance our conservatism with maintaining services. So we've got to keep maintaining the services and not cut so drastically that we're not continuing our core services. So that's kind of the overarching theme, I think, for this budget discussion.
So one thing that still kind of makes me nervous about starting this budget is our projected revenues at $2,450,000. That's only $100,000 down for what we budgeted on in 19. Oh, wait a minute, 2020 budget. It's only $100,000 down. I'm a little bit worried about that. That's not enough at the beginning to cut. With us already being $110,000 down in 1 month of sales tax. So before we really put a number on that, I'd really like to see, I know this is just a draft, but until we get that sales tax for August, for August, so we really kind of get a good day. If we're another $150,000 down, or $100,000 down, then I think we need to rethink our sales tax revenue that's going to be coming in this next year.
That's a good point, Mayor. The sales tax does seem to be one of the most volatile, obviously, revenues that you have. The property tax also could be volatile because of changes in assessed valuation due to certain types of properties that aren't commercial properties and their income. So those, as soon as you get those estimates from the county, that's going to be key as well.
Can you tell us about how de-gallerization or Gallagher being still in place, how that affects his property tax number?
I think I recently was informed that you are a home, let's see, you're Deep Bruce, but you're not home rule.
Statutory city.
Statutory city. So there, I will have to give you some more specifics on that. It depends. It just limits how much you can increase in 1 year over the other, more or less. And
so is that not a city thinking, and we have to wait on the county to do the assessment and see what happens with them?
yes, and on the assessment, they give you certain figures that are used in that calculation for the Gallagher restrictions. And since we're not expecting assessed values to go up very much, I don't know that this would be a year that Gallagher is a big worry, but we should certainly review that each time. It's more when your revenues go up fast that the Gallagher puts the brakes on it.
Okay, all right.
So I think the property tax number, I think, is a pretty good number there because we did have a reassessment. You know, every several years, there's a reassessment process, and that's reflected between 2019 and 2020, as you can see there. And our actual revenues are 171, so year to date, and that's probably not going to increase much, if any, there. So I think we're pretty close on that one, and that's a pretty good number for next year. Sales tax, you're right, is a little more volatile. We just don't know. And be interesting to see what August's report looks like.
The other thing that's going to be volatile is your building related revenues with this lockdown and economic problems that it's caused, how soon people will be building or expanding or remodeling or building new, improving their dwellings or their businesses.
Has it slowed it down this year?
Yeah, so yeah, so right out of the gate, that was kind of the experience that people did a lot of projects that they had been planning to do, but no one knew how long this lockdown would continue or how much of a bite that would take out of the economy. So we'll see how that changes things at all going forward. So should we go down to streets again and look at that bottom line? And John was able to take about $30,000 or more out of his 2020 proposed budget from what is 21 proposed compared to the 2020 adopted budget.
Yeah, we're about $33,000 less.
Mm-hmm.
Good job, John, for this department.
Then moving on to administration. Let's look at the bottom line first. And it's fairly similar to the 2020 budget. It's up slightly. There is a few notes off to the side. Are there any of those in particular that you'd like to point out, Andy?
Yes. Our attorney fees have gone up substantially. Part of that is reimbursed through developer fees if that time of the attorney or our engineer, well, not in this case, but our attorney on this line item is devoted to that. We did have some extra surveying done in preparation for the proposal to annex the city cemetery. So that's why that line item a little bit below that is increased. This is on page 3. And then, we've had lower salary costs. They're tracking less because we have 2 vacancies there in admin with salaries, but then that's been offset by contracted planner and finance officer charges there, and that's in the line item right below the surveying. And then, of course, we had a special election as well, so that's about a third of the way down there. You see a special election. That's not a cost we'd normally incur, but we always do budget a couple $1,000s in that line item. So those are some of the things that push the budget up a little bit this year, more than expected.
Move on to community promotion. You can see that it's dropped for 2020. Yes.
Sorry. Two other things that affect all budgets that I would like council to know. Health insurance, we have a broker for our health benefits for our employees. That's health insurance, life insurance, dental. And the increase for health insurance is relatively modest for what increases have been historically in the past, and that's 5.5% increase in health insurance premiums for next year. And then no increases is planned for life insurance or for dental. So that's some good news there. Thank you, Lori.
Mm-hmm. Okay, there are
another thing, real quick, another thing, council, and I'm sure that nobody's done it, but normally we give a 3 to 4% cost of living raise every year. None of that is figured into this budget. We kept it flat. Let's see how we come out. You know, our main and ultimate goal is to make sure that we keep everybody employed and don't lay anybody off or furlough anybody. So we'll get through this budget without that cost of living piece in there, and then we'll take another look at it at the end. Okay, thanks, Lorraine.
All right. Looking at community promotion, you can see that that's estimated to be lower than 2020 and lower than 2019, moving down to 100,000. Fireworks seems to be the line of the biggest change, to reduce that about 50%. Well, the deposit has been paid, but to reduce the cost for the next year because the deposit was paid in 2020.
Yeah, that's right. So that's why that number has gone down just for next year. We council did give direction to move forward with adoption of the 5-year contract, but that year 1 of that 5-year contract will actually be year 5 of this year's of the current contract, if that makes sense. So next year, instead of having the fireworks this year, it's moved to next year. We've already paid the deposit that's due at the beginning of the year. It's already been paid. So we paid our 50% deposit. So the balance of that will be due at the beginning of next year. But it is, since we've already paid that deposit, we will have a cost savings next year, but that'll go back up the following year as part of that 5-year contract. Yeah, one thing we don't have to discuss it right. We can discuss it as much as council would like right now, but this community promotion is an area that council often likes to weigh in on, you know, things that are items that are related to, as the name implies, community promotion, whether it's fireworks, whether it's the flowers, whether it's individual requests from independent organizations. This is an area earlier this year where we made some pretty big cuts, or we decided, you know, we're going to not spend money in some of these areas. We had already expended money on flowers, felt that was important for the summer, so that was expended this year. But of course, fireworks, some of the other items there have not been spent. So we have some discretion, unlike when you're dealing with, you know, personnel costs and a lot of these fixed costs that we have. This is an area where we do have some latitude to either add more or take away more. So just want council to be aware of that. We can certainly have more discussion about this, but this is an area that we want to give more thought.
All right, moving on to building inspection service expenses. Those match the decline anticipated in building activity. So it's gone down to 78 from 79 this year and from 103,000 in 2018.
And again, that's one, it's hard to predict. If you had asked me in March, if we were gonna see the amount of building activity and interest in development, I just would have thought things would have really ground much slower than they have. And really, they've actually rebounded, I think. So it's a big question mark in my mind, what's going to happen next year. Right now, I think unless we have a big relapse with the pandemic, I think we're going to continue to see activity in building. I think people are investing in their homes, and a lot of people are staying home, improving their homes. We thankfully have not seen a number of business failures in town. And I just think that's remarkable. I think despite all the adversity, we are sustaining most of our businesses in town, and it's been a rough road, and there's a lot of concern about this winter and how that's going to go. But right now, again, that's just an unknown. That's a hard one to budget from year to year. We have, if you have one big project, that can really bump that amount up for review fees. So stay tuned on that one.
And on to the police department, if you look at the bottom line that's on page 5 and then work our way back up, you'll see that the 2021 budget again shows pretty much of a cutback in a way, because it's less than 1% more than the 2020 budget, which, you know, out of $1,012,000, it's less than, it's about $10,000 difference. So you can expect to see most of the line items in that department roughly the same. And then don't know if there's anything that you would like to focus on.
One item I might bring to council's attention on page 4, about halfway down, other contract services. Several years ago, the county sheriff's office required the city to enter into a contract for dispatch services. Before, there hadn't been any additional costs beyond what the city already pays, in property taxes. But this is a new contract, 5-year contract to start charging the city for dispatch services. Each year it increases. And as you can see there, it will go up to $182,000 for dispatch services in next year. That's a $40,000 increase. And that is expected to increase for 2 more years up until it gets to $250,000 a year. So that is an expense we as a city did not have prior to a couple of years ago. And it is a big chunk of the budget. That's several police officer positions. So just to know that that is one of the reasons we've seen an increase in the police department budget over the last several years, is paying for dispatch services, which are critical. But we've got to have them, but we just don't have any control over that. Another item is I might call your attention to is about 2/3 of the way down. It's the city's year this year to host the Lyle Wohlers Annual Awards Luncheon. Unfortunately, that was not able to happen this year, so it gets bumped to next year. So hopefully conditions will be better, and that luncheon, which will be hosted, it'll be our turn to host it next year. That can happen in some form next year.
Okay, let's go on to the court expenses. And those are pretty much the same as 2020. I don't see anything of note there. Do you, Andy?
No. Unless, Diane, do you have anything you want to mention on the court budget?
No, sir.
Okay.
You increase that budget $200. How dare you?
We do have a new municipal judge, as you know. He's been working out great, works with us very well, and very pleased to have him on board. And the costs have been pretty comparable in that area that we contract with our prosecutor and with our municipal court judge. So that's very glad to have, continued stability in that area.
Fire department is a transfer to the district.
And that is keyed to the mill levy. So that's where you see those increases. So our contribution next year will be the same because it went up the previous year, as you can see when there was the reassessment from 113.4 to 130. So that is what we have. We have a fire authority here that serves most of the county, and it is a emergency services district for the unincorporated parts of the county that have a mill levy that's governed by a separate board. And then each municipality provides a contribution to the fire department. So that's what comprises the fire authority. So that's the way it works.
Going on to the parks budget. One of the noteworthy items here is the landscaping services. And I believe those are in lieu of part-time employees. And that's why those are going up. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's what I mentioned earlier. I was thinking of, we had discussion as staff with the mayor about contracting part of our park services or landscaping services, contracting those out. It's been difficult getting seasonal staff. We were fortunate to be able to bring back 2 seasonal staff this summer. We weren't going to do that, but we needed to have them on partly to do the cleaning of the bathrooms of the public restrooms that we have for COVID-19. So that is something that was discussed in the past year's budget. And we want to revive that again for consideration this year. John or Mayor, did you want to add anything to that?
As much like you said, Andy, I concur that we have a very hard time getting summertime help. We already know that I believe both people that helped John out this year is not coming back. One of them, Justin, was a returned employee from the year before. So with the lack of resources and, I believe that we do have folks that know what's going on and has an idea, but I believe to make sure that our grass is green and our trees are growing, that somebody that really knows what we need to do to irrigate and to put some feed on there and things like that. So I'd really like to keep this 30,000 in the budget to try to find a contract service to help us out next summer.
So near the bottom of page 6, you get to the total general fund expenditures. And they total $3,037,000, similar to the 2020 budget, $3,071,000. Remember back at the first page we looked at, though, were the revenues, and they were in the $2,004,000 category. So obviously I'm sorry, maybe it was $2,002,000. You're drawing down your fund balance reserves during this time. That's one reason you have fund balance reserves, is to use them when your revenues aren't as good as you would like during a certain year for various reasons. But you will be drawing on your fund balance by about $587,000 if these amounts hold for your approved budget.
One thing to note is our reserves at the bottom of page 6. Those are budgeted in there. And I know Lorraine and I have had some discussions about if that should be reflected differently, but we do budget for our reserves. So about $500,000 there is factored into that as well, considered an expense, if you will. So that's part of what comprises that amount.
What are the reserves currently, right, just round figure?
Well, for the general fund, we budget $500,000.
Yeah,
good.
Yeah, I was just wondering, but do we not have reserves other than setting in accounts that aren't reflected here? Is all I'm saying. That we're drawing down the pool of funds. Yeah, go ahead, Lorraine.
I'm sorry. At the end of 2019, And we do have a draft of the audit now. It showed your general fund reserves at 2,332,000.
Okay, I was thinking too. Okay, that's what I was wondering. Thank you.
Yes.
So Lorraine, am I right about that, that you're thinking that we should reflect that differently with the reserves? Am I right about that?
If these amounts, the 491, are included in this expense figure of 3 million, then yes, it's not an expense.
Okay.
What would be, I think, better is to show your beginning fund balance at 2,332,000 plus the revenues you're forecasting minus the actual expenses you're forecasting to see what your ending fund balances will be.
Okay. So we may want to consider structurally reflecting things a little bit differently is what you're suggesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Because these reserves don't come anywhere near the amount of the 2,332,000 that you actually started the year with. And these may be required amounts, and I believe that's what it is, that you've got a required Tabor amount and you've got a policy that makes you want to have an operating reserve.
Right.
But if you see the full fund balance of 2 million and some, and then you show parts of it restricted, then you'll see the unrestricted amount that's left for your use.
Okay. Yeah, we've got, under the reserves, you've got 3 line items. You've got contingency reserve, and that is discretionary, if you will. That's for unexpected expenses that may come up. That's a relatively low amount, but designed if there's anything that comes up during the year, that can be drawn on. You've got your Tabor reserves, which is 3%, and then of the budget. And then you've got your operating reserve, which is reflected from council adopted policy on reserves.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, then we get into some of the other funds. So we've went over briefly last time that I met with you, the cemetery fund, which actually gets reported as part of your general fund in your audit. Very little activity there. You've got amounts that get transferred to the pension trust fund, and you've got this cemetery trust fund, which is different from your cemetery operations fund, that just has very little activity. You've got some investments and donations that would come in, and an expenditure that's forecast for $5,000, which seems to be a carryover from the 2020 budget. Moving on to the ramp fund. That fund had $793,000 left at the end of 2019. And so you've got a 2020 amount that's expected to be spent of about 62,000. So you would still have significant amounts of reserves there in the next year, even with $50,000 budgeted for asphalt, curb and gutter. Capital Improvement Fund.
So one thing I might mention on the ramp fund, that we have about $750,000 in that fund that's remaining from that project. So that will be used as a maintenance fund for Colorado Boulevard. Maintenance and future capital improvements, overlays and that sort of thing.
That's just figure attempts to give you that concept, I believe. Then the Capital Improvement Fund, it started the year with $4 million, ended 2019 with $4,454,000. So 2020 was started with that amount. And it's expected that 2020 will have about 400,000 and 80,000 more in revenues from this year's sales taxes. Next year's sales taxes are estimated to be less than this year's budget and less than 2019 actual. So total revenues anticipated for that fund would be $3,000,000 247 because of DOLA grants for your public works facility that have been applied for. And some other grants as well. Assuming that you receive those, then these fund expenditures are showing where some of those will be spent. There's the trails construction, and there's the various projects listed here.
Yeah, a number of these projects, as you can see, are grant dependent. So if we don't get the grants, they're not going to happen. Restoration of the train. If we can do a full-scale restoration, that would be great, but that would be a major grant application to History Colorado. We've already talked about using the Argo gondola fees in advance for getting some trails constructed, and that's reflected here as well. Of course, that would be different. That will come about differently if we don't get the grant. We'll have to have another discussion with council about how we want to handle that. DOLA grant, we've submitted as of October 1st, the grant to DOLA for construction of the new public works facility, and that's at 1 million. So if we don't get that grant, or if it's a reduced amount, we'll have to have a discussion about whether we can still move forward with that project. And I think we also need to have a discussion about if council is comfortable budgeting 1.3 million to go from the improvement fund to go towards that project along with the grant to make that happen. We have reflected the GOCO and CPW grants for trail construction. You'll see that in the next line there. So those are some of the major grants. And then on the expenses, page 8 at the top there, the first note is we were planning to do this year, and that is to repair some of the curbing in the downtown on Minor Street. And that was deferred. So some of that curbing is in really bad shape, but we'd like to get that done next year. We see the VCamp trail construction there. That's comprised of the grants, the advance from the Argo, fees from the gondola. Server replacements at City Hall and PD, that has been deferred, but we are going to be out of warranty next year. So we now have to do that. And we're planning to do that in January. And that's, we have a server for the police department at its location, and then we have a server here at City Hall. The Downtown Improvements Master Plan, that was scheduled for this year, but deferred. That is something we still want to get done. And then we've also talked about in our Downtown Improvements Work Group, building some shared trash enclosures to get the dumpsters away from the Idaho Mall. So that's budgeted in there as well. Some grant matches there. And we do have one capital lease on one of the homes for the parking area behind Tommyknockers. That will be paid off this November. So that's the lease purchase that's completed there. That $25,000 a year, that will be completed.
And the one thing I do want to mention though is if you get any of these grants, the full amount of the expense needs to be shown in the expense line items.
Yes.
Not just the additional amount. So if the 1.7 comes in the revenue, whatever portion of that project is going to be done during 2021 would need to be shown in full, the full expense in the expenditure.
Yep. We'll make sure that happens. And then there are two other in the improvement fund. They're actually separated out about halfway down: historic sites and facilities expenses. We deferred renovating the restrooms here at City Hall. So that's reflected there. And then also rehabilitating the windows at City Hall here on the main level, which are part of the historic structure, and then the train restoration. Two things that are not on here, and again, this is a first draft, so bear in mind, this is a work in progress. We'll be discussing this over the next month. The parking deck is not on here, and the mayor might want to speak to that and an update on where we are with the parking deck behind Tommyknockers. And then also the Citizens Park restrooms are not on here, and I know that's something that John Bordoni feels is quite urgent that needs to get done. So that's something that that was deferred from this year, and that probably needs to be added. I noticed that wasn't on here, so we probably do need to get that added back in.
So the parking structure, we have weekly meetings. It's a parking downtown working group is what we call it. What's happened now is, as I've told you before, there's an earmark of about $2 million from CDOT, and the downtown property owners are actively forming and crafting a bid document to petition to the city. So that's what happens. The group of property owners come together, they come up with a document, they present it to the city to see if they would accept this business improvement district with the funding mechanisms in it, or parking structure. So that's going along really well. We feel that I believe that they're going to have a downtown business or downtown property owner meeting. Do you remember when that meeting was, Andy? 14th, I think.
Next Wednesday, the 14th. Yeah.
Wednesday, to talk about this, to get the property owners on board and the information that they need of what potentially could happen, what it would cost potentially for the property owners, and how they're expected to format and proceed with this bid option.
And we're thinking this would be right now is a 2-level structure with no internal ramping. Mayor, we're thinking around maybe 6 million. Is that the number we're working with? And there'd be several different revenue streams, as council knows. CDOT is committed to provide.
I don't think we should talk about that. It wasn't on the agenda. So let's hang off on that till we get a full conversation.
Okay, but it is something. If
it's 10 minutes after 8, and everybody's starting to get weary-eyed and tired. John Curtis is asleep, so better watch it. I can see you. You're not sitting next to me. You're sitting in front of me on these meetings. So let's get rolling. Let's try to finish up the budget for tonight.
So the Conservation Trust Fund doesn't have too much activity here, but that is one that can only be used for parks or certain recreation purposes. And it started 2020 with about $60,000, and you've got some projects budgeted that could use some of that. The street sales tax revenue fund, let's see, it started 2020 with $2,411,000, and it's showing more revenue coming in, again lower because of the sales tax decline that's anticipated. No other major revenues coming in during 2021, and no major projects shown here like you had in 2020 with the asphalt curb and gutter budget. These would be essentially paying some principal and interest payments and doing some more or less routine repairs. Go forward to water.
Most of the revenue, the projects have been completed that we planned in the 1% with the bonds, with the 1% sales tax for street. And so most of the revenue now is going towards paying off the bonds, principal and interest, as Lorraine mentioned.
Moving to water, the first line item there is usage fees. A 5% rate increase is proposed. I think you know the importance of keeping up your rates with your costs on that. So that still shows a slight decline in projected revenue from 2020. The rest of the revenues are fairly stable from year to year, with the exception of debt proceeds. That's not supposed to be
and that's not supposed to be, and that's supposed to be in the wastewater fund. That was that'll be corrected.
The expenditures are,
What that item is a payment that we received on our loan for the construction of the wastewater treatment plant. And it just got misapplied to the water fund. That'll be corrected to the wastewater fund. So we, the $3 million loan we got from the Power and Water Authority, we have to apply to get reimbursed for periodically for our expenses. So it's not your typical loan where you get it up front. So we have to apply and to accumulate our expenses and then apply back. So that's one of those payments against that loan.
and that was just received in 2020, right? So you haven't seen how that's going to be accounted for yet, but it will essentially be shown as all the revenues being in the year that you got the loan. And this is just cash. It's essentially the Power Authority also serves as your escrow agent to dole out the cash as you spend it, but it won't be a revenue that you'll see on these reports in the future. It's cash with fiscal agent now, and it'll be cash in your bank account when you get it. Okay, there's some comments here on the expenses in the water fund, which we can take a look at. Nothing seems unusual.
John, did you want to highlight anything in particular?
The one in the water fund that adds SCADA lease equipment to water treatment plant. Currently, we have old SCADA system that's having issues talking to the new SCADA system. So we can lease that equipment for $3,000 a month. And that would include repairs and call outs, replacements or anything like that. If we were decided to purchase that equipment, it would be about $140,000, and we would be responsible for any maintenance and repairs to that in addition to purchasing it. So that's what that request is in the for the water treatment plant.
Mayor, you're on mute.
Hey, John Curtis, your thoughts about leasing or purchasing?
Yeah, it can get expensive. I didn't lease, we bought, but yeah, we had techs up there all the time and they're not cheap. So I think this is a better way to go.
Okay. Yeah, I think we discussed that. I think that is the best way to go as well. We always have that maintenance and technicians who come up and fix it on their dime.
Correct.
Okay.
That's really the only one for that one. Water distribution expenses, water meters and antenna read box. We found out just recently that our handheld meter to read the water meters will no longer be supported at the end of this year. So of course they won't update the software and we won't be able to read the meters unless we purchase a new reader with software, which is about $7,000 for another 3 years. And of course, that's just to purchase it. That does not include any maintenance or anything on that reader. So that's why that's in there. And if we don't purchase that one, we would wind up replacing all the meters in town, which would be extraordinarily expensive. So that's why that additional $7,000. And then also on the water meters, the antennas that do get read are getting quite old. Some of them 10, 15 years old, and they're starting to fail. So they need to be replaced also.
Even with those replacements, you've come in essentially the same as the 2020 budget under the water distribution expenditures.
Right.
The next section is essentially your debt service payments. And then we have contingency line item and that operating reserve again. Looking at wastewater fund, again, the 5% rate increase. Similar comments about how employees are split between the water and wastewater budgets and the ORC. The removal, is there something you'd like to comment on there?
The only other addition to that at the wastewater treatment plant is we actually were able to get high-speed internet at the wastewater treatment plant, which, as you can see, comes at a pretty high cost of almost $1,200 per month for internet. But unfortunately, it's another necessity with all of the new PLCs for both water treatment and the new process at the plant.
So that's a bit of an unknown as is the propane and electric associated with the new plant.
Correct.
And moving down to the collection. Again, that budget is very similar to the 2020 budget. It's slightly less. And you've got some principal and interest to budget there. Stormwater is minimal. There is expected to be 100,000 spent in, there has been 100,000 spent so far this year. Is that correct? In 53006096?
That's correct.
And that's it for the stormwater fund, which is actually part of the general fund in your financial reports. Annual financial reports. Then we get to the CIP portion of both the water and wastewater funds. And you can see the notes there about the water treatment filters, the hydropower project. You care to elaborate, John?
The hydropower project is Mike's giving there, but the water treatment filter, we have 3 skids and they have 91 filters on each skid. And those filters last 5 to 7 years. The first skid that's been going on about 8 years. So we need to start replacing those filters for about the next 3 years. What we'll do is replace the filters on one skid next year, take all the good filters, put them on the next skid, and then just keep doing that for a 3-year period. Then we should be good for a while. So that's what that's for.
And then there's the cathodic protection on the next line item. Something that.
That's for the Highway 103 main water line.
John, do we have budgeted for that repair on the 103 bridge?
Well, you know, that was to be this year, but I found out now that the contractor is having issues getting the correct parts. So I need to discuss with council. I'm going to try and get it fixed this year under that budget that we had. If not, we may have to take some of the funds out of next year to finish it. So anyway, but that's,
and are we safe at the city if that line remains turned off?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are we still safe with water being provided to the city with that line continue to be turned off if we have to wait over the winter time?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be fixed late this year or early next year. One of the two, it will get fixed.
Okay. Okay.
I think that's all I had.
Okay, the last item is under the wastewater CIP, and you're showing the DOLA grant and then those proceeds from the Water and Power Authority loan. And they will actually already be in your beginning fund balance from 2020 and spent down as you complete some projects with those upgrade projects.
All right. Council, you have any questions at this point with the budget? Concerns? Thoughts? All right, well, we will have, I believe the way we're gonna do this, Andy, correct me if I'm wrong, that over the next several weeks, we'll have each individual department head come in and kind of discuss with us their rhyme and reason, what their budget is and why they came up to the number that they came up with, how they determine cuts, increases and things like that. So we can be prepared to ask questions to them so we understand better of how they got their numbers and what they feel for the future.
Our next budget work session will be in 2 weeks, and we'll have an updated, cleaner copy of the proposed budget for council's consideration.
Right. Thanks, Lorraine. Does anybody have anything else? Y'all want to stay on, or is 3 hours enough for a meeting?
I think it's
All
time
right.
to go. I'd have to say, though, there certainly seems to be a lot more unknowns this year. Out of all the years I've been on council, this has more fuzziness about it than anything I ever remember in terms of going forward in
All right.
the revenue end. So it's a different feel in a way.
Okay, well, council, prepare any questions you might have for our next budget meeting. Thanks, everybody. Good job. And meeting adjourned. We'll talk to you soon.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank you.